台湾断交以后整个我们的这个安全的关系、军事的关系、政治的关系、外交的关系都会发生非常严重的问题。所以假如我们从台湾的这个历史角度来看，过去这个差不多70多年来，可以分成2部分。一部分就是79年以前，美国跟所谓的中华民国有这个正式的邦交的关系，同时又有这个Mutual Defense Treaty 就是共同协防的这个条约，所以我们的国际地位跟这个安全可以说得到美国正式条约的这个保障。但是79年以后就非常不一样，特别是我们退出联合国，在72年退出联合国以后，这个情况就更严重。所以在这个70多年的历史当中，后半段我觉得我们依赖这个美国的这个所谓的这个国内法，差不多有这种国际条约性质的国内法的保障，在政治上跟安全上非常重要。那么今天呢，我们就有3位专家来为我们分析这个问题。今天的研讨会可以说分成两半上半场就是强调对这个台湾关系法的分析跟回顾，那么下半场呢就看在这个乱世当中呢我们台湾的机会跟挑战。我想这个对我们来讲是台湾非常重要的生存的问题。那么我们跟美国的关系过去怎么样，那将来展望我们怎么样才能够加强，也是一个非常重要的意义。那么今天呢我想我们很幸运的有3位专家的，那么这个跟我们今天的这个 sponsor 这个会议的研讨会的这个sponsor 也有关系。那么在我右边呢是这个台湾新世纪文教基金会，那么陈教授对这一方面的问题非常专家。另外这边是这个陈义奇先生他是这个基进党的这个主席。那么他国际经验、国际学术的经验跟国内的政治运动更是非常的这个独显。所以我们很幸运，但是更幸运的是，我们今天有一位真正很难得的这个专家就是这个 William Stanton 司徒文，是叫你司徒文先生还是司先生？司徒大使。那么这个我为什么强调这个司徒大使是非常非常的这个特别他在学术上，当然他有他的博士学位，这个在这个Fordham 纽约的 Fordham， 还有这个North Carolina 的这个博士学位，后来这个进这个美国国务院做这个外交的工作。那么他这个国务院的经验不只是说在美国同时在东非、在非洲都有相当久的经验。那么在最近这个10几年来，他主要是在亚洲，在 Australia，然后在韩国，然后最后他的这个外交的身份就在台湾结束。
中国6年在北
京。对，北京。OK， 所以两岸的问题他都
吃苦了应该提到。
OK， 很酷这个经验非常的这个多。那么更特别的是，平常外交官退休以后就回美国去，但是他这个就是我们怎么说这个热爱台湾 ，fall in love with 台湾，所以这个退休以后他就继续留在台湾。那么在清华大学当过教授，当过副校长那么目前呢是在台大国际关系学院当教授那么这个是真的是所有的外交官呢我认得的大概只有2、3个欧洲 有些外交官就继续待在台湾。那么我们这个师徒大使真的是很不容易。所以今天我不要花太多时间呢，让这3位专家先由这个师徒大使来做这个专题的这个分析然后呢我们有2位与谈人 ，OK， 那现在我们热烈欢迎师徒大使，
谢谢。谢谢高博士大使给我那么好的介绍。你们都应该原谅我，是因为我开始学习中文，我已经39岁，所以我本来的时候没有那么聪明，以后39岁我更笨，所以我的中文的进步是很慢，所以我就可以一点。所以我说英文，宋教授他翻译有一点，所以还有你有那个大部分我的 slides 你都有，所以anyway， 各位贵宾同事朋友女士先生 I should start. Today is or actually the 10th of this month was the 40th anniversary of the Taiwan Relations Act. So it's an important time to think, what did the Taiwan Relations Act accomplish? But moreover, where do we go from here?
4月10号是台湾关系法40周年的一个纪念日，那我们要检讨一下它完成了什么，并且未来会带来给我们什么。
What's important to understand is in many ways the Taiwan Relations Act, as well as the 6 assurances given to Taiwan, were a way of compensating and correcting mistakes inherent in the so-called 3 communiques.
那么很重要的理解是说，台湾关系法跟6项保证，那么很重要是要补偿台湾或是纠正过去的错误。
It's very clear from the historical record, 2 things. One, everybody thought that there were going to be long-term benefits from our relationship with China, and everybody thought that Taiwan was probably going to disappear of its own accord.
这些错误是在3个公报里头。那什么样的错误？第一个是说美国认为会跟中国有长期的关系；第二个是说台湾很快就会被中国吸纳成为中国的一部分。
These assumptions were totally wrong, so it's a great thing that they were corrected by the Taiwan Relations Act.
那各位都知道这2个前提假设都是错误的，所以很重要就是台湾关系法要来纠正这样的错误。
下一次可以。You went too far. No, go back. Yeah. There are many assumptions that were made about China and Taiwan that have proven to be wrong, and more we see, particularly in the last couple of years, more and more Americans recognize the fact. First of all, the Kissingerian Nixon strategic argument that this would divide Russia or the Soviet Union and China, that proved to be in the long run totally wrong.
那么什么样的错误呢？第一个是说基辛格跟尼克森想的战略认为说可以联中制俄，那么这个证明是错误的。
And Kissinger assumed we were going to make progress on a range of regional, bilateral, international issues, but in fact, over the years, cooperation has been almost nil on any important matters.
美中关系正常化，本来他们也想说去处理一些双边的议题，比如说越南、北韩，还有伊朗等等。后来也发现这些议题其实没有那么重要。
The liberalization argument, that is, if we opened up trade with China, that China would become the modernization theory, that Taiwan would become more democratic, that also proved to be totally untrue, particularly with the arrival of Xi Jinping.
那么另外一个想法就是说，美中交往之后，中国会变成比较自由化、比较民主化，follow 那个台湾的这个路径。结果现在证明是错误，特别是习近平上来之后。
But Clinton liked to use it, I know, because I was in the State Department at the time, because nobody wants to say, oh, we want trade because big business wants to do business there. But in fact, a lot of businesses didn't succeed, and not everybody succeeded equally. For example, as many as 3 million Americans lost employment as a result of our relationship with China.
另外一个想法是说，美中关系正常化之后，美国的企业可以得利，但是后来发现，美国企业在中国不是所有都是成功，那成功也只是少数。那么而且因为这样子，美国自己内部有300万多人失业。
The U.S. also, we greatly underestimated the weaknesses within China, but also we greatly underestimated its future belligerence.
另外就是美国低估了中国的在经济上以及政治上所遇到的困难，特别是中国跟美国敌对的这种可能性也被低估。
Over the years, I've increasingly understood why a Japanese diplomat said to me, "We hope China continues to develop and never becomes developed."
日本外交官常跟我开玩笑说，我们都希望中国会继续发展，可是它就是永远都还在继续发展。
And most of all, America totally underestimated the Taiwan's ability to transform itself into a modern, prosperous democracy.
另外就是美国太低估台湾自己可以转变成一个民主政体的可能性。
Just last night I gave a talk about what I call Taiwan the modern miracle, because of so much that it's accomplished that many Taiwanese don't even realize.
昨天晚上我给了一个演讲，叫做《台湾现代的奇迹》。我们太多时候都太低估台湾自己创造的奇迹。
Next slide. In fact, all 3 communiques, in retrospect, are very much, I think the right word, for relics. They're sort of the ruins of the Cold War that still exist. And, Blumenthal and Shriver, who are 2 strong supporters of Taiwan, they wrote an article where they said it is hard to think of another set of relationships still governed by joint communiques from the Cold War. That's what these are. They're relics of the Cold War.
美中3公报从我们现在回顾起来，可以认为是冷战的遗迹。那么这2位作者在那个国家利益的这个杂志上写说，现在很难想象还有一个主要的关系是由3个公报来管制的。
Next one. Well, I'm not going to read the Shanghai Communique. Rather, I'm just going to, in the next slide, talk about what's wrong with it. Okay? The biggest thing that surprised me when I came to AIT and I began reading the communiques and just look at it objectively, what do they say? I realized that the central statement in the Shanghai Communique has no factual basis.
那么第一个公报就是1972年的上海公报，那它的弱点是它没有事实上的基础。
Because the communique is premised on the argument that all Chinese on either side of the Taiwan Strait maintain there is but one China and that Taiwan is a part of China.
因为它中间主张说，两岸的中国人都认为只有一个中国，而台湾是中国的一部分。
Now that was true certainly for Mao. It was certainly true for Chiang Kai-shek. But nobody asked during the Cultural Revolution the people of Taiwan, the people of China, what do you think? And nobody asked the Taiwanese people.
这个也许对于毛泽东或蒋介石是正确，但是没有人问台湾人民的意见或是中国人民的意见。
But of course it came about because nobody wanted to refer to the Taiwan government.
但是他是这样子写，是因为他不想要提到台湾政府。
So every time we say 3 communiques, the U.S. government, we're basically reiterating something that's just factually inaccurate.
所以每次提到美中3公报，其实我们要记得说，第一个公报它的事实基础是没有的。
Next one. The second communique, is very flawed because it never meant the same thing for either side. It's a little bit like the 92 consensus. You can't have a consensus if one side says it means one China and the other side says it means one China, different interpretations.
第二个公报1979年的这个公报呢，它的问题是它其实没有双方的这个同意。比如说像9·2共识也是一样，它不可能对一方来说是一中原则，另外一个是一中各表。
But the United States tried to fuzz the issue by acknowledging the Chinese position that there's one China and Taiwan is part of China.
那么他的语句是说，美国政府认知中国的立场是只有一个中国，而台湾是中国的一部分。
But this so-called one China policy was never, as China always implies, China's one China principle. Because when you say acknowledge things, I always give the example, I may acknowledge that you think I'm crazy, but that doesn't mean I agree with you.
那么什么叫做认知呢？可能举个例子说，我认知你认为我是疯子，但是不表示我同意你说我是疯子。
So Washington intentionally didn't use the word recognize, use it intentionally as China had wished, but the Chinese version of the text, they use it. They say chunren, which we never use, because one of the mistakes, which is a fundamental divide, is they said the Chinese version would be okay for China and the English version would be okay for the United States, but they're not the same.
所以说，在英文上他写说认知，就是说我知道了，但中文他就用承认，但是英文上从来没有用过承认，所以对于英文来说，美国说 OK， 中文说我也认为是 OK， 所以但是他们两个不一样。
Next one. So the other thing is we have to look at is the Taiwan Relations Act, particularly when it responds to the second communique. It makes clear in many ways that emphasis is on peace. There was language by the United States about peaceful means of a solution, which we don't emphasize enough nowadays. And second of all, that nothing that would happen between cross-strait relations should contravene human rights, especially with regard to the human rights of the Taiwanese people.
另外两个现在比较不受强调的是说，他强调说两岸的问题应该用和平方式来解决，并且应该尊重台湾人民的人权。
Now, obviously, Clinton, who was the one who introduced human rights into U.S. foreign policy, about the time my early years in the Foreign Service, it was his way of saying, okay, we're going to have relations with China, but we're going to emphasize human rights.
那么其实把那个人权带进外交体系，在美国是克林顿总统，但是说，我们要强调在外交体系中要保护人权。
Also, we made it clear from our position that the U.S. will, that means not should, it's not encouraging, but says will. It's a definitive statement, provide arms to China for self-defense.
另外在这边提到说，美国将会决定要对台湾提供防御性的武器。
Okay, next one. One of the things that the TRA also did, besides emphasizing human rights, emphasizing peaceful means, many people don't realize how important it was that it set up AIT. Because originally, the White House had no plans. Even though there were thousands of Americans living here, there was an American school, there was a huge amount of commerce and trade already. How are we going to conduct relations? It was like it didn't matter as long as we had our communiques. So they established AIT, very important. This is what the new $256 million AIT looks like.
那么另外一个现在不受强调的是，台湾关系法建立了美国在台协会，那这个是现在的新的这个馆，它非常的昂贵的造价。那这是说当时我们没有想到说还好有这个机制，是说因为美国跟台湾关系非常的密切，包括外侨，包括学校，那么要如何来维持跟台湾的关系，需要一个机制，那就是 AIT。
So if the first two communiques are flawed, the third communique is just totally wrong. Because we've never abided by it anyway. Because it said we would gradually reduce arms, but we never did. So it was just erroneous.
那么如果说前两个美中公报都是有缺陷，第三个公报根本就是完全错误，因为他说他要尽量减少，逐年减少对台湾的军备的提供，其实根本从来没有实行过。
And in fact, the 6 assurances where President Reagan was unhappy about the third communique, it was one of the reasons that Al Haig was fired as Secretary of State, and that's why he, with Taiwanese encouraged him, he agreed to the 6 assurances.
那么其实为了要去让他第3个公报不会那么错误，那个美国雷根总统把他原来去海格的这个国务卿给 fire 掉，然后去做了6项保证来证明说美国对台湾还是有安全的保证。
Now the irony is that when Al Haig left the State Department when he was fired by President Reagan, he joined United Technologies, and at that time he was trying to sell Sikorsky helicopters both to Taiwan and to China.
那么海格被这个从国务卿移开以后，他到了科技公司，其实就是分别对中国以及对台湾卖武器。
Okay, and then the 6 assurances, reinforce this view that we want to be helpful to Taiwan, and we're not going to negotiate Taiwan's future with China.
那么第6项保证中间，各位可以看内容，基本上就是美国会说他会认真的执行跟台湾的关系，并且说不会出卖台湾。
So in any case, to just summarize, it's clear that the history, the substance of the U.S. agreements and policies toward Taiwan indicated in the 3 communiques are not so simple and can't be explained by just saying one China.
那么，所以我们看这个图非常复杂，也就是我们用这个图来说明说，3项美中公报说其实都是没有那么的简单。那么简单来说，就是说这是有一中原则。
You just go back a second. So the big question now is, what does the U.S. do now at this time in history with this kind of very flawed historical diplomatic history behind us?
如果说在历史上、外交上有这些错误的话，现在问题就是说，美国现在可以怎么做？
Yeah. In the previous cartoon, it said, by honoring the one China policy, we can move towards our real priorities. And of course, South China Sea, trade, North Korea, currency manipulation, none of those things have been solved.
所以说，你看，好像说我们在一中原则有一个共识之后，我们其他问题都可以解决。但是各位看南海，或是贸易的问题，或是北韩的问题，或是其他的，或是这个货币贬值的问题，其实都没有办法解决。
So you say one China policy and it doesn't solve anything. And the problem is we don't know if that's what President Trump thinks.
那现在说一中政策其实没有解决任何问题，因为我们不太知道美国川普总统在想什么。
Now, early on, there were, not as soon as it should have been, but as early as 2002, Congress began to act to say we have to do things to change the nature of the relationship. And a big decision, this is the Congressional Act, it was in the Foreign Relations Authorization Act, which said active diplomats and active military officers, although it didn't say military, but when you say the head of any other department or agency may detail an employee to AIT, that began to happen earlier for the State Department after 2002, but it didn't happen until 2005 for the Pentagon.
那么其实美国近年来逐渐在改变过去的政策，比如说2002年的这个外交外交授权法，就是说，先是对国务院，然后后来是对2005年开始对于这个国防部说可以派官员，就是他的这个现任的官员来处理台美的关系。
So in the late 80s, when I came here, I had to hand over my diplomatic passport and sign an agreement that I was no longer in the Foreign Service, as if the Chinese were ever going to see the agreement. And I got then another agreement that I would be reinstated at the end of my tour, studying 10 months of Chinese. We no longer go through any of that. I couldn't use my diplomatic passport coming here, but I didn't have to hand it over like a criminal.
Yeah. 所以在实务上什么意思呢？就是为了美国跟台湾之间是非官方的关系，所以对他们实务上来说，为了要在 AIT 任职，他必须要把外交部的这个外交人员的护照，然后要交出去，然后用另外一个护照来进入台湾。
对 And particularly, I read a cable describing how many countries their diplomats were coming to Taiwan and they were using diplomatic passports, and we were trying to be purer than the pure.
但是我们发现其他的国家其实并没有像我们这样完全的遵守说一定要没有外交官身份才能跟台湾来往。
And my own contribution to starting to, make Taiwan more recognizably an American government institution was to change the old AIT sign, which is in the middle, which I think Doug Paul did, great fan of the Kuomintang. And I put the American flag back in. And I also, for the first time, I flew the American flag over AIT. And I got Mr. Armitage's help with that.
OK， 所以那个司徒的大使在 AIT 任主任的时候，他把中间原来这个 AIT 的这个标志改成上面的，那就放了美国的国旗在上面，并且在 AIT 的馆上升了美国的国旗。
Am I going too slow? The other thing is you should recognize is one thing Taiwan should do. That was a step in the right direction. But there are still many self-imposed restrictions Washington lawyers thought up to prove that we're really halting diplomatic relations with China, which of course we didn't really do. We just called them unofficial.
另外一个是美国自己加注在自己身上的限制。
So you see, we used to get do's and don'ts. I don't know if they still do, but when I came out, say Taiwan, but don't use Republic of China, which is kind of contradictory in a way. I wonder if Ma Yingjiu knew that. And do use economy, island, area, or jurisdiction, but don't refer to it as a country. Well, that's stupid. Because if you're speaking English and you're referring to Taiwan, it's just abnormal. Not at some point, you're not going to refer to it as an area. You know, you're going to say, well, in this country. So that's what I used to do, and nobody ever really noticed, I guess. They weren't, by that time, they weren't as restrictive about it. But I don't know, what we'll see in a few minutes. More recent legislation says we have to review the guidelines for how you behave in Taiwan. Congress wants us to do that in accordance with the fact that Taiwan is a friend, it's a partner, it's a democracy, and we have to give it respect.
那么各位现在看到，就是他给外交人员的有说可以做什么，不可以做什么。比如说可以叫台湾，不能叫ROC， 把台湾可以叫一个岛或是一个地区，但是不能叫台湾是一个国家。
In fact, once I heard of an ambassador to APEC come and have a meeting with the Taiwanese president, and he kept on saying, well, as an important economic entity, he never once used Taiwan or country. He constantly called it an economic entity. That sounds stupid.
所以在那个 APEC 的场合，他们都叫台湾是一个经济实体，但从来不叫台湾是一个国家，这实在是很愚蠢的事情。
So there are other things we have to do. AIT Washington and CCNAA were designed as cutouts. But when I was here and I wanted to talk to somebody, I went directly to ministries or to the president, if necessary, or the prime minister. I never called on CCNAA. We maybe had lunch twice a year, to be respectful toward one another.
那另外一个就是建立了白手套，在美国叫做 AIT 华盛顿，那么在台湾叫做北美事务协调委员。可是实际上美国的驻 AIT 的人员直接跟我们政府打交道，很少经过那个北美事务协调委员会。
And I think there are still restrictions, although it was getting more flexible when I left the State Department, but on what buildings Taiwan diplomats can go into in Washington.
那么另外一个就是说，台湾官员可以进入华府的哪些国家的办公室。
Right. Okay, then we can move on. There are a lot of other reference measures that the U.S. could unilaterally adopt. So one would be, in my view, to improve the relationship, is the U.S. should never, and particularly if it's the State Department spokesperson who knows nothing about Taiwan, should never ever refer to one China in any way. Because it's confusing, it's imprecise, it's inaccurate, it's misleading. So you shouldn't say, well, in accordance with our one China policy. No, don't say that.
另外一个是美国自己可以单方去改进的，比如说不要在外交的场合再提到所谓一中政策，因为它非常的令人混淆。
We should also stop referring to the three communiques as if they're, it's the Bible, and we're referencing something that's holy. As I pointed out, one's factually incorrect, one was effectively repudiated. and it was never observed in any case. So stop it. China can refer to it, okay? We should refer, as we're doing more and more in Congresses, to the Taiwan Relations Act and the 6 assurances.
另外一个美国可以做的是，不要把3个公报当成圣经一样，一直的去提它，因为我们刚刚你讲它有许多的缺陷，中国可以提它，但是美国可以不要。我们可以更多的提到美国台湾关系法以及6项保证。
One more, go back. Yeah. The other thing is Clinton was the one who changed during his visit. I was in Beijing at the time in '98. He changed declared the policy. He just declared it that the U.S. would not support the admission of Taiwan into any international organization for which statehood is a requirement. Now that contravenes the Taiwan Relations Act, which is law. It's not a presidential statement, it is law, because that says nothing in this act may be construed as a basis for excluding or expelling Taiwan from continued membership in any or international organization. So we should have never accepted it, and we should have fought harder.
另外一项错误是，比如说克林顿总统在98年去中国访问的时候说不支持台湾加入以国家资格为要件的国际组织。其实这一件事情跟台湾关系法是相反的，是抵触的，因为台湾关系法有说不，台湾关系法中间规定不能够说要来排除台湾在国际会员国际组织中间的会员。
We should also unilaterally remind every time we talk about Taiwan that all of our agreements with China were predicated on a peaceful resolution. And every time they threaten Taiwan, we should remind them of what they agreed to with their own words in the communiques.
另外一项，我们美国可以做的是提醒中国说，美国对于这些文件的前提是说，要对台湾的问题要和平解决。
We should also relax restrictions unilaterally on where Taiwanese diplomats can go in U.S. government buildings. We've had terrorists come into the State Department when we were negotiating with them. I mean, Yasser Arafat was there, Jerry Adams from the IRA in Ireland, so Taiwanese diplomats ought to be able to go in.
另外，像美国可以做的，去松绑台湾官员进入，比如说国务院去参考事情，比如说在过去跟这个被认为国际组织，比如说阿拉法特或是 Jerry Adams， 就是 IRA 的人，他们都可以进国务院，台湾官员更没有理由不能进国务院。
Many other things are already obvious but are being reinforced by congressional resolutions. Support for Taiwan's defense, prioritize getting a free trade agreement. I hope the fact that we have a Deputy Assistant Secretary in charge of commercial relations visiting right now, that will help. I'm going to try to talk to him. We should resist, more strongly support efforts against China's effort to make the name of Taiwan disappear. Everything has to refer to to it as part of China.
那么另外其他事情，美国可以做的是说，加强跟台湾之间国防合作，加强台美之间的双边自由贸易协定。比如说现在那个国务院管商务的这个国务院驻青就在台北访问，或者是说抱歉 ，sorry。
Okay. The other thing I would recommend is that we should have high-level exchanges. It's been said innumerable times now in various congressional resolutions, but I don't think we should advertise it, and it should always be at the discretion of Taiwan to decide, because it bears the greatest risk if there's a reaction from China. But I think we don't necessarily have to advertise everything we do. Send a high-level person, don't talk about it. The main thing is to have higher level contact, both in Washington and here, so we could be more discreet about it. The same thing, we shouldn't announce arms sales to Taiwan, just do it. We don't have to tell anybody.
这些紧密的台美合作，有些是可以做，但是不用事事都要公布，或是说，比如说更多的武器的贩卖，或是更多的高层的往来，其实就做，不用说就可以了。
I mean, China doesn't tell us when it's going to send missile or nuclear technology to China. Next one. Yeah. Oh no, I'm sorry. Remind, as I've already indicated, the PRC of its own words. particularly if you look at the 72 communique. I mean, it's like wherever there's oppression, there's resistance. Countries want independence. Nations want liberation. Okay, all nations, big or small, should be equal. Big nations should not bully the small, and strong nations should not bully the weak. China will never be a superpower, and it opposes hegemony and power politics of any kind. We should repeat this ad nauseum to the Chinese every time they do anything that puts pressure on Taiwan. These are their own words. You're bullying somebody. Don't do it.
另外可以做的是，我们可以提醒中国自己讲的话，在72年的时候，他说中国绝对不会成为超级强权，不会成为霸权，不会大欺小。那每次中国要霸凌台湾的时候，就提醒他说：“你不是说你不会大欺小吗？”
More things the U.S. could do on the Taiwan side, rather, things that Taiwan should do. One is, I think Taiwan has to do a better public relations job of advertising its successes. I even wrote a piece that was in Taiwan News, which has now nearly 150,000 hits, which talks about the achievements of Taiwan economically, technologically, the fact that it's a middle power, and many Taiwanese themselves don't recognize this, but Taiwan should spend more money, more effort into establishing its place in the world.
另外是台湾可以自己多强调一下台湾的成就，比如说司徒文大使其实帮台湾做了一些很好的宣传，他有一篇文章就讲台湾的成就有15万次的这个点阅率，台湾应该更多的花这些公众的资源来宣传自己的成就。
And both Taiwan as well as the United States should do more to get a free trade agreement.
然后台美之间应该要努力去达成双边的那个自由贸易协定。
Okay. The U.S. congressional support and at the administrative level for Taiwan now is very strong. But frankly, we don't know at the very top level what will happen. The overall direction since 2016 toward Taiwan has been really positive. Resolutions in May of 2016, December of 2016, April of 2018 report that we'd granted a submarine technology license. The fact that later there was a report that we'd signed an agreement to share scientific research. And then finally the Taiwan Travel Act. All of these things are very positive.
那么国会现在台美关系整个总览是行政部门及国会对于台湾支持都非常强，我们只是不太知道总统他在想什么。各位手册第10页中间有2016年以来美国有各项的挺台的，不管是决议或是法案，或是要传递给台湾这个潜水艇的武器的科技等等都在。
We don't have to go through the Taiwan Travel Act except I'll point out that it refers to Taiwan as a beacon of democracy, and it says this. In effect, if you're going to have relations with a country, you need to treat them in this following manner. So indirectly, it's the first time I've ever seen a statement referring to Taiwan as a country.
那实际上我们要特别提出，台湾旅行法中间有说台湾是一个民主灯塔的国家，那是在美国官方文书上第一次非常算是隐晦的称台湾为一个国家。
Okay, and next one, yeah, you can see visits to a country. It should indicator of the breadth and depth of the ties between the United States and such country. So indirectly, they're talking about Taiwan.
所以各位的第9页17页所说那个拜访一个国家是讲国家。
The next one. We've had the National Defense Authorization Act of 2019. More recently, just before that rather, the Asia Reassurance Initiative Act. Both of these were efforts to bolster our defense relationship with Taiwan. The problem isn't these laws being passed. The problem is whether they're acting on them. I don't know.
2018年的时候，美国有亚洲再保证法，就是美国要重新拾回在亚洲的领导权，以及未来会在这个国防安全、国防授权法会有专章提到台湾，这些都是立法，但是重要是要实行出来。
One interesting thing, though, is in all of these pieces of legislation, there's no reference to One China, and there's no reference to the 3 communiques. It's always the Taiwan Relations Act and the 6 assurances.
这些近年的立法都没有再提到3公报，提到的是台湾关系法以及6项保证。
And then recently, in January, there hasn't been any follow-up action, but Senator Gardner introduced legislation. Basically, if a country lowers its level of relations with Taiwan or breaks diplomatic relations, the U.S. should do the same thing, put the same pressure on those countries as a disincentive. In other words, do unto others as they would do unto Taiwan.
今年1月的时候 ，Gardner 参议员有提台北法，那未来可能再提出，也就是说，如果有其他国家降低跟台湾的外交关系的话，美国应该降低跟那个国家的外交关系。
Next one. We don't have to go through this one. One of the most interesting ones now is the Taiwan Assurance Act to strengthen ties. It's moved forward a little bit. I think it's now been submitted to the Senate, the full Senate, and the full House, but urges Taiwan to increase its defense spending. It doesn't help Taiwan that its defense spending is still at about the 2% level. But second of all, it again calls on calls for the first time, I think, for joint military exercises. And it calls for the chief of the Liaison Affairs Office at AIT, effectively the defense attaché, should be a flag or a general officer, in other words, an admiral or a general. And finally, calls on the U.S. Trade Representative to resume meetings to get a free trade agreement.
另外就是最近提出来的台湾保证法，中间有几点值得注意。第一个是说要加强，希望台湾加强自己的国防支出，而不是只限于2%的国防预算。另外就是说台美之间的联合军演，以及说 AIT 的武官可以有将官级或是海军将官级的武官，并且台美应该要赶快尽速加强他们双边贸易协定、自由贸易协定的这个协商。
And it also calls for the President of the United States within 6 months of passage to review all the guidelines, the do's and don'ts for Taiwan, and then they should be crafted with the intent to deepen and expand U.S. relations and be based on the value, merits, and importance of the relationship.
那么他并且要求美国总统在这个法案通过6个月内要向国会提出报告，说要如何检讨台美关系、外交关系的这个 guideline。并且说他这个未来的政策必须要加深台美关系之间的基于共同价值的合作。
And because the Congress doesn't trust the White House, they say within 6 months of enactment, we want to see the new guidelines. Show us the proof.
所以基本上就是说，美国总统你要通过6个月的时候，要交给国会说你怎么样改了现在的实践。
You know, and it was a response in part by some of the senators to the increasing aggression of China.
那么这个当然是说对于中国步步进逼的一种回应。
So I conclude it's clear to me the U.S. is becoming far more realistic about what China is and what threats it represents. We're far more understanding of Taiwan's importance, both strategically but also as a symbol of democracy in the world. And we're far more frank, I think, now about U.S. interests and strategic interests and also U.S. principles.
所以我们整个回顾就是说，美国对于中国的本质以及中国带来的威胁有更清楚的认识，并且对于台湾的价值，不是只有战略价值，还有台湾作为民主的一个价值，有更清楚的认识，并且对于美国在台美中间的利益有什么，有更清楚的认识。
I don't envision it happening, but I would like to see a clear statement from the United States that until and unless China becomes a free and democratic country where rule of law and respect for human rights are fundamental principles, we don't support unification, and also the other condition, the Taiwan people have to want unification.
所以我们其实可以更进一步，比如说各位手册第13页下半段说，美国甚至可以说，除非中国变成一个民主、法治、尊重人权的国家，然后再来考虑统一问题，或者是还有说，台湾人民必须能接受统一，才有统一的问题。
until that day comes, I know 40% of Taiwan's exports go to China or to China through Hong Kong. But I don't think China has that much to offer Taiwan other than, those people who are doing business and trade. That's important, but that's why I'd like to see Taiwan have a free trade agreement with the US and with other countries, particularly with Japan. Meanwhile, we should state that a secure and democratic Taiwan is just as critical as peaceful cross-strait relations for a stable and secure Asia.
另外就是说，台湾我知道台湾跟中国好像有很紧密的贸易联系，可是我们希望说台湾跟美国及日本有更深的贸易的连接，并且我们应该要说，一个安全的民主的台湾是对于台湾海峡的情势以及整个亚洲的情势是一个基础的基石。
Thank you. 我要感谢我的科议员，他说的非常好，特别有可能有的时候我说的太快不清楚，所以我觉得它是一个现代化的奇迹。